There is a place on this planet that has been photographed more than almost any other. Millions of people have stood at its famous overlook, raised their cameras, and captured the same image. Stone terraces rising into cloud, temples balanced on a mountain's edge, mist rolling through the valley below. They believe they are looking at one of the great surviving wonders of the ancient world. What almost none of them realize is that they are looking at less than half of it. Between 2023 and 2025, a convergence of scientific disciplines, genetic analysis, aerial laser scanning, satellite geological imaging, quietly dismantled everything the academic world thought it understood about Machu Picchu. The findings did not arrive as a single dramatic announcement. They arrived in pieces from separate laboratories in separate countries, conducted by researchers who were not initially coordinating with each other. And when the picture those pieces formed came into focus, it was not the picture anyone had been expecting. What lies beneath the terraces and temples of Machu Picchu is older, larger, more deliberate, and more sophisticated than 5 centuries of scholarship had managed to detect. And the story of what happened next, what governments did and did not do once this information became available, is, in its own way, just as remarkable as the discovery itself. The DNA that broke the theory. The dominant academic interpretation of Machu Picchu for the better part of a century was relatively straightforward. The site was understood as a royal retreat, a high-altitude estate constructed for the Inca Emperor Pachacutec somewhere around 1450 CE, occupied by a relatively small and ethnically homogeneous population of royal attendants and religious specialists. It was an impressive place, certainly, but a specific and limited one. A vacation palace in the clouds for the most powerful ruler in South America. That interpretation began to collapse in a genetics laboratory at Yale University when researchers led by bioarchaeologist Dr. Lucy Salazar and geneticist Dr. Richard Berger completed DNA analysis on the skeletal remains of 34 individuals buried within the boundaries of Machu Picchu. These were not incidental remains. They were deliberate burials, carefully placed throughout the citadel over an extended period. The study was originally designed to confirm the existing theory, to provide genetic evidence supporting the idea of a small, royally affiliated population. Instead, it produced something that sent Salazar to the phone at 2 in the morning. The genetic profiles of those 34 individuals showed diversity that no single royal household could account for. People with ancestry from the Andean highlands, the Pacific coast, regions far to the north, all buried together in a single location. The range of geographic origins suggested not an intimate royal court, but something far more deliberate in its assembly, a population drawn intentionally from across the full breadth of the Inca Empire. The site was not a retreat. It was a hub. A carefully constructed convergence point for people from regions that, in the geography of South America, are separated by some of the most punishing terrain on the continent. Among the burials, 6 women carried genetic markers linking them not to the Andean highlands at all, but to the lowland Amazon basin. Women from the jungle, buried at 2,440 meters above sea level in a mountain citadel surrounded by vertical passes, freezing altitudes, and geography that remains genuinely dangerous to traverse even today with modern equipment. The distance between the Amazon lowlands and the summit where Machu Picchu stands is not merely physical. It is an entirely different world. Different air, different temperature, different ecosystem, different everything. And these women had crossed it. One pairing in particular stopped the research team. A mother and daughter, buried near each other, whose bone chemistry told 2 completely different stories. Isotope analysis, which reads the chemical signature left by the water, food, and air of wherever a person spent their formative years, showed that the mother had grown up in one region and the daughter in another. They were biologically connected, but geographically separated, brought together at Machu Picchu in death after having lived their lives in different parts of an empire. Someone, or some institutional authority, had moved them. Someone had decided that these specific individuals needed to be at this specific place. The logistics of doing so, crossing thousands of feet of altitude change and hundreds of miles of difficult terrain 5 centuries ago, required organizational power of an order that the royal retreat theory had never needed to account for. 12 buildings that were never on any map. While the genetics team was working in New Haven, a separate group of scientists was preparing to fly laser-equipped drones over sections of Machu Picchu that no tourist has ever visited and most researchers have never been permitted to access. The technology they were using, known as LiDAR, fires millions of laser pulses at the ground surface and uses the returning signals to construct three-dimensional maps of everything beneath the vegetation. It sees through jungle canopy. It detects buried foundations. It renders invisible architecture visible in ways that no previous survey technology could match. The drone surveys conducted in 2024 targeted forested slopes surrounding the known site boundaries, areas that had been classified for decades as natural terrain, jungle backdrop to the famous structures, scenery rather than subject. What appeared on the researchers' screens when they processed the data was 12 previously unknown structures. Buildings and platforms that had never appeared on any map, any survey, or any archaeological record in the entire history of Machu Picchu's study, since Hiram Bingham brought the site to international attention in 1911. Some showed signatures consistent with ceremonial use. Others suggested residential or administrative functions. All of them were there, had always been there, and had been invisible to every generation of researchers who preceded this one. The geographic location of these discoveries carries its own significance. The areas where the drone surveys found these structures are restricted zones, sections of the Machu Picchu landscape that have been off-limits to tourists and most academic researchers for decades. The reasons for those restrictions have never been comprehensively explained in public documentation. What is on record is that these zones were sealed, that scanning them was evidently not a priority for the agencies with authority over the site, and that 12 previously unknown buildings were sitting in them waiting to be found. The immediate question those 12 buildings raised was a larger one. If that many unknown structures could be hiding in the immediately adjacent slopes, what was buried in the broader valleys, the further ridgelines, the unexplored terrain surrounding the known citadel? Were researchers looking at a single ancient complex, or at the visible and heavily photographed center of something far more extensive? The geological accident that was never an accident. In 2025, a geologist in Brazil analyzing satellite imagery of the Machu Picchu region identified something in the subsurface data that he reportedly ran through his models 3 times before trusting the result. 2 major geological fault lines, each extending for roughly 175 kilometers, crossed directly beneath the citadel. Not near it, not in the surrounding valley, directly beneath the main temple complex, intersecting at a point that aligns almost precisely with the structures at the heart of the site. 2 fault lines forming an X, with Machu Picchu sitting at the crossing. To most people, fault lines suggest instability, earthquake country, dangerous ground. The standard assumption would be that building a permanent settlement on top of 2 intersecting fault lines represents catastrophic engineering judgment. But when the research team ran computer simulations modeling over 1,000 earthquake scenarios of varying magnitudes and directions, every single scenario produced the same unexpected result. The intersection of those 2 fault lines is one of the most geologically stable points in the entire region. The opposing tectonic forces balance each other, creating a zone where ground movement during seismic events is dramatically reduced compared to the surrounding landscape. The Inca had placed their most sacred and architecturally sophisticated site on the single most earthquake-resistant location available to them across an enormous stretch of mountain terrain. This is not a small observation. Cusco, the Inca capital, has been devastated by major earthquakes multiple times throughout its history. Colonial structures built with materials and techniques far more recent than Machu Picchu have been leveled, while the ancient citadel in the mountains stands without significant seismic damage after 5 centuries. The identification of why required orbiting satellites and computational modeling that did not exist until the 21st century. The Inca found the same answer in the 15th century. Without any instrument we have been able to identify and built accordingly. The city you cannot see from the viewpoint. When modern structural engineers began conducting detailed analysis of Machu Picchu's construction, they arrived at a figure that has still not fully penetrated public understanding. The terraces, temples, plazas, and royal enclosures that appear in every photograph of the site, the parts that tourists visit, photograph, and describe to friends, represent approximately 40% of the actual engineering work that was done there. The remaining 60% exists underground. Beneath the visible surface, excavations have revealed a complete and sophisticated infrastructure. Drainage systems engineered to channel rainfall from the highest elevations through stone-lined conduits, distributing water across the terrace system, filtering it through precisely graded gravel, and expelling it at the mountain's base in controlled flows. Foundation networks extending 9 feet below the visible terraces, providing structural stability on mountain terrain that by every expectation should experience significant erosion and subsidence. Retaining systems that manage the weight of the visible architecture above while simultaneously handling the hydraulic pressure of an Andean wet season. All of this was constructed without iron tools, without wheeled transport for materials, and without mortar between the fitted stones. And it continues to function. The drainage systems of Machu Picchu are currently managing rainwater more effectively than the storm management infrastructure of many contemporary cities. Engineers who have studied these systems in detail have used the word surpasses when comparing ancient Inca hydraulic engineering to modern equivalents. The visible monument is extraordinary. The invisible city beneath it may be more impressive still. At the site's highest point, a carved granite stone called the Intihuatana, meaning roughly the place where the sun is anchored, was treated for most of its documented history as ceremonial sculpture. When researchers applied precise GPS measurement to it, they found it aligned to within 3 degrees of true geographic north. Not magnetic north, which drifts over geological time, but the actual rotational axis of the planet. The same stone functions as a solar calendar, marking solstices and equinoxes with an accuracy of within 15 minutes, consistently, across 5 centuries, without any adjustment or maintenance. The astronomical precision encoded in a single piece of hand-carved granite matches standards used today for satellite calibration. 3 weeks that changed everything. In January of 2026, Peru's Ministry of Culture formally approved a comprehensive 20-year protection plan for Machu Picchu. Conservation measures, controlled visitor management, preservation frameworks extending to 2046. On paper, it was exactly what scientists and heritage organizations had been calling for in response to 5 years of discoveries demonstrating the site's extraordinary complexity and fragility. 3 weeks later, the Peruvian government approved the fast-tracking of an international airport project in the nearby Chinchero area, targeting completion within 18 months and designed to accommodate 8 million visitors annually. That figure represents roughly double the current visitor volume, directed into a valley that independent assessments have consistently identified as already operating at the limits of its water, sanitation, transport, and heritage preservation capacity. The study formally determining whether the region can sustainably handle that volume of visitors was not scheduled to be completed until September 2026, 7 months after the airport project received its approval. The capacity analysis, whose conclusions should have informed the airport decision, will arrive after the decision was made. Construction of the runway involves direct impact on 600-year-old Inca agricultural terraces in Chinchero. Terraces whose irrigation and drainage systems are still functioning, representing the same engineering tradition responsible for the underground infrastructure beneath Machu Picchu itself. Once those terraces are gone, the living architectural record they represent is permanently gone with them. Researchers who have spent years documenting the underground systems, the restricted zone structures, the geological positioning, and the genetic evidence of Machu Picchu's true function and scale have published consistent warnings about what accelerated mass tourism at this scale would mean for the buried infrastructure that has survived half a millennium. Vibration from construction, changes in groundwater from increased surface activity, physical pressure on an underground system that was engineered for specific and limited loads. These are not speculative concerns. They are documented engineering risks applied to structures that no current technology could rebuild if damaged. The response from Peruvian authorities to this body of peer-reviewed research has been, consistently, silence. No engagement with the specific data points. No published counter-arguments. No alternative preservation analysis. A 20-year protection plan signed, and, within weeks, a construction timeline approved that the protection plan's own framework cannot accommodate. What the mountain has not given up. 5 years of converging scientific discovery have established something that was not understood before. Machu Picchu is not the site that a century of tourism built its mythology around. It is not a royal retreat. It is not a simple ceremonial platform. It is a deliberately positioned, geologically selected, astronomically calibrated, ethnically diverse convergence point of imperial power, most of which remains underground and largely unstudied, surrounded by additional structures that did not appear on any map until laser technology made them visible in 2024. The questions that body of evidence generates are significant and have not been answered. How far does the underground infrastructure actually extend? What do the 12 newly identified structures contain? And how many more remain in surrounding terrain that has not yet been scanned? What was the true administrative and political function of a site that assembled people from across an entire empire and built its foundations to a geological precision we needed satellites to verify? How much of what actually happened at Machu Picchu is still buried, still sealed, still waiting beneath a mountain that has kept its secrets for 500 years? The timeline now running in parallel with those questions belongs to construction crews rather than researchers. The airport project moves forward. The capacity report arrives in September 2026. The planes are scheduled to begin landing in late 2027. And somewhere beneath the terraces that will absorb 8 million additional visitors per year, the drainage systems built without mortar or iron will continue, for now, to do exactly what they were designed to do, quietly, invisibly, with a precision that no one walking above them will notice until the day they stop.